Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Woolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing innovative new technologies to stop the destructive power of the world's worst wildfires. I've got an amazing guest today. I've got Luke Woolf. What an amazing last name, I have to say. Luke, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, quite the last name, right?
It is. It's the best, right? I mean, you've got an extra O and this and that, some adornments
Yeah.
that I'm missing, but the essence is the same. So,
Yeah,
Luke, I
right.
noticed you were a special agent for the U.S. Forestry Department. Is that right? Or,
Correct. Yeah, as a special agent criminal investigator for the U.S. Forest Service.
so, what type of investigations did you do?
Oh, wow. Everything really. Our duties as a special agent in the U.S. Forest Service just really handle all the felony level and complex investigations affecting national forest system lands. Basically crimes on your national forests. And so, went from everything, anywhere from, of course, fire investigations, arson, to timber theft, threats on employees, to archaeological, resource damage and theft, looting caves, all
Wow,
kinds of, here, it's primarily out of Arizona and New Mexico. So we had a lot of smuggling operations down on the Mexico border, and then of course marijuana dope grows all over the forest. Worked a lot of that, and then of course we, as a federal agent, I worked with with the FBI, DEA, ATF, whatever, and local county sheriffs, was a big part of our interface. And so, yeah, anything kind of affecting our national
that's a
forest,
really wide
we
ranging
dealt
thing.
with it. Yeah,
What year
for
did you become a
sure.
special agent?
So I left the fire side of the shop with the Forest Service in 2003, and that's when I switched into investigations.
That's when what?
That's when I switched over to law enforcement and investigations.
I see. So in
Yeah,
2004 is
two,
when you became a special
yeah,
agent?
2003.
2003. So during the course of 2003, how many times, if you can recall approximately, did you, stand in front of the mirror going, special agent? And
Not too many times.
not too many.
Not too many because, yeah, I had to get through the academy first. So
I
yeah,
see.
I reserved that. So yeah, but it was nice to get that eventually, because that's a long hot summer in southeast Georgia. I'll tell you
Oh,
that.
no kidding. Right. Right. So are there things that you learned along the way? And I know you're still doing investigations, right?
Correct.
Privately as an expert witness investigator. What are the
Right.
types of things that you're investigating now?
Yeah, mainly just all these major fires that we're having. I mean, that's really I do a lot of things, of course, but my specialty is wildland fire investigation, and that's primarily my workload. With my little firm, that's what I concentrate on. I'm a one man firm,
Okay.
so
Do you have any good employees?
yeah, yeah, just the one,
Oh,
uh,
you're
you
you're
know.
the you're the best employee there, right?
Yeah, best one here. So I'm employee of the month every month. So
Oh, that's great. So you get the
um, re-
parking place and everything.
I get it all. Yeah.
So when you're investigating fires now, are you investigating them with an eye towards possible criminal behavior or civil liability, or what's the
Uh,
big call for you now?
it's both, but primarily it's the civil liability side of it. It's basically, as a origin and cause investigator, that's what I look for is when and where did it start, and who started it. And then,
Okay,
that's
whether it was
really is,
intentional or not, right?
whether it's intentional or not. Yeah, as far as the Code of Federal Regulations go, those are strict liability laws, and doesn't matter if you started it on purpose or not, you're responsible. So that's usually where it is. And so I just provide that information, my findings, and yeah,
and then they do what they do with it, right?
And they do what they do. We let the attorneys go from there.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more and more uses for what you do in civil liability cases, because these fires are very expensive to the victims of them, and I would imagine that, right, while you're really not on the side of, or in the sector of figuring out what are the damages worth, you still have to identify who is responsible for it, and then I guess they go after their insurance, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's a big price tag. I mean, you can just look a couple years back with PG&E going bankrupt, probably one of the largest public bankruptcies on record, probably
ever. Yeah,
$24+ billion bankruptcy. So and it was all tied into Wildland Fire. And so it's definitely a concern for a lot of people.
Did you investigate that case?
Yeah, so that was really started my firm in 2016, right when I left the U.S. Forest Service, and in 2017, 2018, 2019, I was pretty much primarily involved in every fire, all the cases, all the big fires in California.
So are there takeaways from what you found? Are there things that people who unwittingly created fires do consistently that other people who don't want to unwittingly create those fires should learn from?
Well, the majority of those cases, of course, were all power line caused fires. So, there is that. And, when you recognize that problem, then there's, it was pretty consistent over the years with those Santa Ana wind events and, the power lines. And obviously, caused a lot of fires and a lot of damage, and primarily almost, all the fires that I investigated through those years, they were all power line caused. And so, definitely recognize the problem there. Where it goes from here, we'll see, as far as preventing those. But, that's the first step in prevention is, you got to know what's causing it.
Right. And, so when we say power lines, that's a pretty big bucket right there. Are there specific things? Is it like arcing at the capacitor? Are the lines dipping? Are the lines touching each other? Are they too close to vegetation? Like, specifically, what is it about power lines that leads them to generate fires?
Well, you kind of just hit them all right there.
Okay.
It could be vegetation, trees falling into the lines. It can be lines, slapping each other in a high wind or whatever. There can be apparatus failures. Say a conductor or something, fails. Any kind of debris into the line, may get blown. Let's just say fall into or blown into an active power line, which will create a spark. So that hits the ground, and that's all you need. Just one little spark,
and she's off and
running, off to the races.
So maintenance programs would really be important to make sure that you don't have, faulty equipment or vegetation growing up into your power lines. And I know the utilities probably invest a lot in that.
Utilities spend a lot of time and effort in, making sure their equipment is sound, and that the vegetation is, where it's supposed to be, their vegetation management. And, but of course, that's not always 100%. Everybody gets behind sometimes, and sometimes they spend a lot of time even inspecting their poles, just to make sure that they're sound. And if they find that they're not, they replace them and do those things. But that's a big part of their program, I know.
That's a huge job, right?
Yeah, huge job.
Yeah, and then early detection along the power distribution grid. Right. If we know that's where we're going to start, you don't have to have cameras pointing everywhere, right? If 90% of your fires are here, then put 90% of your cameras here.
Right.
Would make sense. What
Correct.
about vegetation treatment? Does it make sense to, apply retardant underneath the lines in the area where you're likely to have an ignition so that if something does start, it doesn't take off?
Yeah, I think
I'm talking about like
that's a
chemical
good,
treatment, right? With
correct. Yeah, that's a great place to start. That's kind of been a kind of a new product topic that's come up over the last couple of years is using this. Basically, it's long term, ground applied retardant. It's basically the same stuff that's in the air tankers that are dropped, on an active wildland fire. But you can come and put it in, months in advance, and have that in those, whether it's a roadside or underneath a power line or next to a railroad track, where you might have that threat and that possibility. And then, throw some ground applied retardant on it that'll last a long time. It'll
yeah,
last through rainstorms or whatever. And yeah, it can definitely help mitigate, the possibilities of starts for sure.
and I'm sure it's expensive to do that over when you look at California having like 40,000 miles of transmission lines, but
Absolutely.
probably cheaper than when people die and neighborhoods are lost.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you, compare that cost, it's pretty cheap upfront cost if it's effective. And,
Yeah,
you gotta, that's a big part of it. But, just the PG&E example, I mean, it's, they could have spent let's just say $100 million maybe treating those areas. And, you know, those fires were, they were responsible, 20
and,
plus billion dollars damages
and
and numerous deaths.
yes, right. So, and not every instance of arcing is going to lead to wildfire, because you have to have both the arcing conditions present in the same vicinity as easily flammable fuels, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Dry
You have to have a
vegetation, high winds. So
hmm
are there heat maps, so to speak, no pun intended, of the areas where you're most likely to have that confluence of power line fault and perfect conditions for ignition?
Yeah. So there's, I mean, obviously local knowledge, is huge when it comes to this. So, of course the local, we'll just stick with power lines. The local utility are going to know where they're vulnerable in these areas, of course. And then, of course, the local, firefighters, they understand, when is it fire season, what are the conditions here, and when is it likely for something like this. And so that's why there's, of course, been policy there in California now to where they're anticipating these, strong wind events, Santa Ana winds, whatever, that, they shut the power off. They
Yeah.
shut the grid down. And, that's one way to mitigate this. But yeah, so there is definitely areas as, there's just going to be areas that are prone to this. And then of course, the wildland urban interface is, just growing, and, there's more homes, adjacent to these wild areas, that are, makes them very vulnerable to
I
wildland
want
fire.
to I want to coin a new phrase because we have the WUI, right? And
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
people think, oh, well, I'm not next to wildland, so I don't have to
Yeah.
worry. So we should also have the GUI, which would be the grassland urban interface, because big
Yeah.
fires like the Marshall Fire, people weren't thinking, oh, I'm living at the edge of the forest here, I need to watch out, but they
Yeah.
were at the edge of large fields of grassland. And I think
Correct.
that most of these fires are started, in the GUI, right,
Yeah.
by grasses.
Yeah. The Marshall
So
Fire is a perfect example of that, of where, I was standing up there and, January 1st and in the snow, and, after, what, 1,100 homes just burnt, all
yeah,
from grass. So, yeah, very interesting for sure, because I mean, wildland fire didn't care what the fuel is. It doesn't have to
right.
be, wildland, so to speak. It doesn't have to be trees and grass and shrubs. It'll run through homes, just as quickly as, and
faster
as
sometimes, right?
obvious. Yeah.
And hotter
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
dirtier.
Hotter and dirtier, and and much more intense. And, of course that's where, unfortunately we lose lives. Folks staying too long or have, trouble egressing because it gets there a lot quicker than people realize. If you're not familiar with wildland fire and how it works and operates, it'll, as obvious, we can, think about the campfire, think about what happened in Maui, what's going on in Islay right now. It's just caught off guard. I think they have time to get out.
Is it just that we're more aware of it now, or is it really getting worse?
I think it's really getting worse. This is, I've been, fighting fires and involved in, wildland fire since 1994. And, this is really, kind of a new story over the last couple of years as far as the intensity, and losing entire communities is just, that was unheard of at the first of my career. That didn't happen. Yeah, we lost homes and we lost, some neighborhoods, but it wasn't nothing at the scale that it is now. I mean, when, Paradise, California basically got wiped off.
Yeah.
Completely burned down. That's just not something, beginning of my career.
Is that because the more fires you have, the more likely you're going to have fires that are massively devastating? Or is the nature of the fires changed because the fuels are hotter and drier, or the winds are stronger, or both?
Yeah, I think probably both. Obviously, we kind of talked about how the urban interface is encroaching into the wildland more and more. There's just more and more homes. And then, of course, I think we're in a, regardless of what you think about global warming or whatever it is, I think we're just in a climate cycle of, that's where we're at right now. It's hotter, it's drier, and, obviously that's making our wildland fires more intense. There's a lot of topics we could discuss with that as far as forest management in the past and what kind of fuels we have on the ground now, and, logging versus not logging, and, whatever it is, the absence of, prescribed fire for a long time, and then reintroducing that, back into the ecosystem. So there's a lot of things going on, but, really, in kind of the way I see it, we're just in that climate cycle of, okay, we're hot and dry, and these fires, it's a natural part of, it's nature's, broom or whatever. And it's when the forest is ready and it needs thinned out and burnt, it's going to happen one way or the other. So whether we do it or Mother Nature takes over and goes ahead and does it. But, now we're having these large stand replacement fires, very often. And they're big and they're nasty, and they have progressed since I started, like I said, in the early 90s, mid 90s, through now, fires are just bigger and hotter and more intense.
So it's possible that something that we've done in the last 100 years, whether it's making the climate warmer or forest management practices or logging practices or lack of logging, something has caused change. What can we learn from the way things were to the way things are now to looking forward? Like, what do you recommend we be doing differently than what we're doing now, or that we've done recently?
Yeah, I think, you can connect those dots looking backwards and see what worked and what didn't, and what were the reasons, for the actions, really. And then, you just got to, put the heads together and see, okay, recognize this problem, and, what can we do to mitigate it, and what policies looking forward, should, is it one of those aha moments where it's like, maybe we do need to, thin these forests out mechanically ourselves, as humans, or, kind of delve back into the, even like, the indigenous folks, for forever, use fire to their advantage. And so, how much do we want to do, as far as utilizing, fire as, in a good way, and not suppressing all fires, because that was the policy for a long time. but for a good reason. I mean, that was, a great resource. We're in numerous world wars, back in those times when those policies were started, and we were preserving timber and the watershed. And so, and really it was, if we needed to build a fleet of ships or whatever, we needed the timber to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of our resource in our economy. And so, it's understandable. But then, maybe it got to a point to where we just, left too much fuel out there.
Yeah. You start accruing that fuel debt.
Yeah.
Right. You got to pay for that. So,
absolutely.
And with hundreds of millions of acres out there, I can't imagine that we're going to start some kind of workforce program where we're going to, cut down every third tree in the United States, right?
Correct.
And for the most part, nature has its own cycle of managing wildfire and regrowth in a pretty stable way. So
Correct.
It would seem that our main focus is, where do the trees and the humans meet, and focus our mitigation efforts there, right? Because we can't stop wildfires,
right.
nor should we necessarily.
Right.
What we want to do is we want to, mitigate their impact on the built environment is my understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it. I mean, the wildland and the urban, they're going to interface, and that's not going to change.
Right.
More and more folks are moving out to the west, and that's just what's going to happen. And so yeah, definitely got to get programs in place to try to mitigate that and understand that. And that's comes part of education and prevention and suppression and stride fire management and using these things. And I know the U.S. Forest Service really kind of took a beating as far as their policy went with the fires in New Mexico 2 years ago, and those being attributed to escape control burns, and but I know they shut down their program and they revamped and are working to come up with a better program as far as their prescribed fire goes. So that's going to be definitely a focus, I think, for land management agencies, is introducing fire safely
right.
back into the to the forest and to the wildland. And then also what do you do with the urban interface, and how do you prep and prepare, because fires are inevitable, they're going to come and we're going to have to deal with them. And it's just how prepared are we, and where's our best defense really is
right. And we talk about fires, right? But we're really also largely talking about ember defense, right?
Sure.
If the fire's not within 50 or 60 feet of your house, that radiant heat's not going to get you. But those embers collecting up in your wooden mulch and in your gutters and your attic, like, that's going to get you. And that is something that could be mitigated relatively inexpensively compared to thinning operations. So I think you're right.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to see some policy change there.
Yeah, if you look at it, and you can basically retrofit homes, in the urban interface, those that are already existing, with fire resistant, materials, cover up your eaves, instead of a shake shingle roof, maybe, put a tile roof on it or a metal roof. Same with your siding. Don't stack your wood pile underneath your wood deck, behind your house, and get you 30, 50 feet of defensible space around your home, and those are, when you go through and, you drive through these, towns and areas that have been devastated by wildfire, you'll see homes that made it and stood, and all their neighbors didn't. And usually the common denominator is what that home was built out of, and then what the landscaping was around it. And, and they survived. They survived those fires. So
losing the house is not an inevitability.
Right, exactly. And like you said, you don't need direct flame impingement on these homes to catch them on fire. Just embers from the fire itself or from the neighbor's house. If it catches, it's gonna impact the neighbor's home as well. And then, but instead built out of the correct materials and the right preparation, those homes can survive.
Yeah. So given that the neighbor's house could light your house, that really does point that this needs to be community-based solution.
Absolutely,
Every individual doing what they can, but communities working together, particularly at the perimeter homes.
Yeah, particularly there, because like you said, just like in the Marshall Fire, once it got into the home operations, it kind of really didn't matter. I mean, you're blocks away from the grass. I mean, you're in the middle of a subdivision, paved roads, and you wouldn't think you'd
car
have any kind of
dealerships and
threat.
hotels, and Starbucks, and just this doesn't look like fireland, right? Yeah,
exactly. But once it establishes, in the structures, it's especially in conditions like the Marshall Fire. I mean, those are hurricane force winds, and it was dry, and it was ready. And so, once it, went from the grass and cut that, those first structures, it just runs through the structures like it ran through the grass and runs through the trees.
Right.
It's
I
really
described
no
it as a wildfire where the homes were the trees.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
With your old special agent hat on, maybe the badge too.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't discuss ideas because you don't want to give ideas. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw wildfires, as the next form of terrorism, because it with a lighter you can take out a whole town with no planning, co-defendants, right? Co-conspirators. I mean, this is, you can cause a lot of damage with very little effort. And I'm wondering, I can't be the only person who's thinking that could be a problem. I'm wondering, is that something that Homeland Security is working on? Is that something that the Forestry Department is working on? And if so, what do you do about it? How do you protect against it or detect it or?
Yeah, so that's a great topic, and that was definitely a part of our concerns. I'll just say, when I was in the government. So from a national security standpoint, absolutely, that was on our radar as a terrorist activity that could impact not it maybe not so much as devastation as trying to burn down take lives or burn down a home, but it's tying up resources. And they are very expensive, and it takes all hands on deck. When we've seen it when these fires rage, like we've seen like the North Bay fires in 2017, 2018, that completely overtook an area for many months. Really over 2 fire seasons or 3, 17, 18, and 19. So yeah, absolutely. So it could definitely be a terrorism tool, and that's definitely on the radar.
And we certainly don't want that. But in terms of like preparedness and response, when I look at a wildfire campaign, it always occurs to me that if it were a military campaign instead of a civilian campaign, there'd be a whole lot more money and technology thrown into it, right? They'd have satellites that could put out, fires from space with ray guns, and Boeing and Lockheed and everybody else would have really amazing technology, and they would take a lot of the danger out of this because they'd have really cool toys that would do the work, robots. But that doesn't happen on civilian firefighting budgets. So I'm wondering if we saw more of the misuse of fire by miscreants, and it became more of a Homeland Security issue or military threat issue, do you think we might see more military style budgets thrown against this?
Well, I think, if that was definitely identified as a problem, for sure, as, terrorism, via arson. Yeah, absolutely. I think there'd definitely be a focus there, whether it, I don't know if the U.S. Forest Service budget would increase. I don't know exactly how that would go. But yeah, you just look at the DoD budget versus, the budget of the U.S. Forest Service. I mean, Yeah,
And there's this sense in the budget world that that causation determines the budget for the response rather than the result, right? If 3 people die in house fires, maybe they send you over and you figure out who caused it, and not a big budget spent there, but 3 Marines die overseas, boy, you're going to see $1 billion easily spent, right, to remedy, rectify, and prevent that from happening again. And in my mind, human life is human life, and it seems like a disproportionately small response when it's fire versus an identifiable enemy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll say, from my perspective, looking at this, and this is where I think we have a lot of room for improvement in this world, is you need to properly solidly identify what's causing your fires, and regardless of what that leads to, that with no bias, that we find out, is it, could it be tied to terrorism? Is it just a power line problem? Is it just a just next door railways? That's what's causing all whatever it is. Yeah. But you like I'd said before, to prevent that, you need to have solid facts and data pointing to the cause, and then you really have to be solid on that, so you can make decisions moving forward as far as prevention goes, whatever that is. If it's military action or more budget or whatever first. Yeah, we got to know what's causing it first, and so that's where a budget would help greatly in the natural resource agencies that are responsible for investigating fires. Is we need more qualified, properly trained, experienced, and properly mentored wildland fire investigators, so we can rely on this data and that we can properly investigate more and more fires. Because, it's, I've seen reports to where, and, we'd have to fact check some of this stuff, but, up to maybe 40-50% of wildland fires are investigated. So
that sounds high, even, right?
Yeah, and that even sounds high. And then properly investigated is a whole nother number, much lower, because it's just really a lack of resources, of human resources, of qualified individuals, because you can get trained, you can get FI 210 and get minimally trained and maybe fill out your task book and get red card qualified through NWCG or whatever, so you can be a proper wildland fire investigator. But really, in my opinion, there's as much art as it is science, and you really have to understand fire, and been staring at fire for a very, very long time, and because it really takes that kind of eye and that experience, because every fire is different. 2 fires are going to be the same or even close to the same, and it takes as much effort to investigate a 1-acre fire as it does 100,000 acre. Particularly no different, because it all comes down to the origin area, and that's where you got to be solid on that, and that's where you find the origin is where you find the cause, and so you need to be able to do that and do it effectively. And so I would love to see some type of mentorship program. The training's there. I think we're pretty solid on that. It's the after the training, and getting these new fire investigators, and even some that have been around for a while that just haven't had a lot of exposure, is to, get them, paired up with a solid, qualified, investigator that can teach them the ropes and show them how to do it. And then you got to go out and do it. You got to get a lot of investigations under your belt, even get any kind of comfortable. It's extremely difficult, and a lot of people don't like to do it. You got to kind of have a passion for it, because it is hot and dirty and nasty, and it takes a long time, and it's definitely not always glamorous, that's for sure. But but I know there's folks out there that are very interested in it and want to do it. I think we just need to increase those budgets, and let's get us some more investigators out there.
Absolutely. Luke, I'm going to let you get back to investigating in just a minute. Since you brought up the topic of mentorship, when you were getting started in this, who was helpful to you?
We had some, just in my area here, predominantly here in the Southwest U.S., we just had some of the old dogs that had been around forever and kind of started like me. Most special agents, law enforcement officers, U.S. Forest Service, a lot of them started in fire. So I had a good, strong fire behavior background. And then, of course, moved on to law enforcement investigations and became fire investigation, became really good at it because they had that background and really already had a career, in fire and real fire and understanding it. And so those are the guys, and gals that I learned from. And it was literally
was there one person who
there.
particularly stood out and saw the possibility in you and gave you the right encouragement and said, come hang out under my wing for a minute? It's a long list.
Yeah, it's a pretty good list. I was pretty fortunate, to be able to have a good group, and not just locally here in Arizona, New Mexico. I had investigators that we work with for Cal Fire, for the U.S. Forest Service, for Bureau of Land Management. Yeah, I had a lot of opportunity, and I was fortunate to where when the new NWCD training came out and FI 210, back in the early 2000s, is being one of the first to go through that training. And, most of those that wrote the book on that would come out and, put on that training. That's where, I learned a lot also.
Look, if people think they may need your investigative services or would love you to mentor them, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best is go to my website. It's wildlandfireinvestigation.com. And shoot me an email, or just I put my number on there, and you can just call me direct. And
beautiful.
And, we can talk.
Awesome. I appreciate your candid answers to a tough problem, and I appreciate you joining us here on the Fire Break.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So I look forward to talking in the future. And I understand you're out of Boulder, and I'll be up there doing some Marshall Fire stuff in April. So maybe we
please let me know, and let's go out and have a meal together.
Absolutely.
All right, great. That's Luke Woolf. Thanks so much for joining us. You've been listening or watching The Fire Break. The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing new technologies for reducing the impact of the world's most dangerous fires. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. Take care.